Welcome to another video for the Chess.com YouTube channel. I've done a couple already. My name is Grandmaster Simon Williams, and we're going to have a look at a little bit of crazy analysis today. And in this YouTube clip, I recommend you pause the video when I say pause, so you can try and have a go at solving some of the problems. Now, what are we going to be doing today? Well, I thought we'd do something a little bit different. Now, you know, everyone's moaning about bankers at the moment and capitalism. They are in England anyway, and they're saying there's too much greed, there's too much greed in the world, you need to give all your money up and all this stuff, all this blah, 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 which I kind of agree with in a certain way. And I'm going to try to see if I can correlate that to the chess world. And we're going to look at something called, well, I've coined this phrase, the empty square sacrifice. Now, what on earth does that mean? That's a bit like airy-fairy, you might be thinking. That means where basically you put a piece on an empty square to try to lure your opponent into capturing that to start a checkmate attack or have very big material gain. In chess, most sacrifices come from sacrifices on particular squares. So when you crash, you destroy your opponent's king structure by taking one of his pawns around his king, or you maybe give up a rook to open up his king on f7, something like this. But today we are looking at this rather Zen-like idea of the empty square sacrifice, and hopefully things will become a bit more clear after the first couple of examples. So this is my Zen-like chess lesson. Can it happen? Will it be possible? Who knows? But let's give it a go. And we're going to start off with a very famous example, and this is an example played by the late and great Bobby Fischer, one of America's strongest ever player. I mean, who knows if Nakamura will ever quite get to the heights of Fischer. We'll have to wait and see. And this is probably one of his most famous examples. So I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if you've seen the first couple of examples I'm going to go through here. But don't worry, I'm sure you haven't seen them all. And here he's playing against Paul Benko. And we're now going to see an example of the empty square sacrifice. Okay, so in this position, what happens? Well, black Paul Benko played queen to e8, and the idea of this move is that he wants to defend in some situations with the move f5. So for example, now if Fischer had played bishop takes d4, which in fact he did, pawn takes d4, and now continued with the very natural looking e5 move, black had quite a crafty way to try and stop checkmate here. Can you see that move? Can you see how black can stop checkmate and not lose a piece? That is the move f5. And here he blocks the bishop's diagonal, and you threaten the queen on h5, and if queen takes queen, then black can play knight takes queen. So that was Paul Benko's great idea. Not so great, as we're going to see. But Fischer had a very subtle way to stop this from occurring at the board. He first took on d4, and after pawn takes d4, he now came up with one of the most famous examples of what I'd say is the empty square sacrifice. So if you haven't seen this example before, I recommend you pause the video now. They're very tricky, some of these, because they're not normal. They're these Zen-like sacrifices where you don't crash through by capturing something. You put a piece on an empty square, but for a particular reason. And each of these moves we're going to look at have a particular reason. So, what is the empty square sacrifice here? Well, in the game, the whole defensive plan that black has here is guarded. Well, it's rolled around his f-pawn. It really does rely on this f-pawn moving. So if you can stop that f-pawn moving, great. And Bobby Fischer did this by playing the quite phenomenal and brilliant rook to f6. Wow, that is just a very famous and brilliant move. Giving up a whole rook to stop the f-pawn from moving. And then after something like bishop takes f6, well, he didn't actually play that, but if black had tried bishop takes f6, now white could have played e5. And we can now see that the combination of bishop and queen against h7 and this threat queen takes h7 checkmate is unstoppable. So this is the idea in this situation of rook to f6. Very, very nice example there. Okay, well, let's move on to another one. We're keeping them quite short and sweet. And let's move on to a game here. And this game here is another very famous example, which you may well have seen. And this game has been coined the gold coin game, played between Levitsky and Frank Marshall. And apparently this was played in a coffee shop. Again, Marshall, an American player, so we're having a bit of American theme today. And after this game, well, after the next move and after the game, there was a crowd. It was played in this coffee shop, big crowd around the board, and everyone after the move went, wow! And then they started throwing gold coins onto the board because it was such a beautiful game. And all the crowd got their gold coins out. Went, oh, very good show, old boy. Here you go, here's a gold coin. Lovely, lovely. And Frank Marshall walked away a rich man. If only they did that in my local Starbucks, I'd be a very happy man when I play my friend at chess. Only if the nice young girl who walks past says, oh, brilliant game, young man. Oh, here's a gold coin. Yes, that would be very nice. It doesn't happen that way to me very often. But okay, now, if you haven't seen this, White played rook to c5. And now Frank Marshall played this empty square sacrifice. Quite a hard move to see. Black is a piece up here, so Black didn't actually need to do this. But there is a quite phenomenal move here, quite a phenomenal idea. Now, if you haven't seen this, pause the video, see if you can try to find an empty square sacrifice now. Okay, well, the move that Marshall played that made this game so famous was the ridiculous looking queen to g3. Wow, what on earth is that? Ridiculous move. And this is one of the most beautiful moves in chess I think that's ever occurred. And the point is, if f takes g3, well, now the f file is opened up, so Black can checkmate in 2 moves. Again, pause the video if you're not sure how. By knight to e2 and rook takes f1, shakmat. And if White tries taking this queen another way, let's say with the h-pawn, well, now it's checkmate in 1 move, again involving this knight. The knight comes to e2, checkmate. So another very nice move. And, well, if White takes with the queen on g3, again, Black goes for knight to e2 check, king here, knight takes g3 check. And Black's going to be a lot of material up at the end of this. Again, if White takes with the f-pawn, you open up the Black rook on f8, so this will be checkmate. So this queen to g3 is a quite stunning move. It also pins the g-pawn to the board. So White can't move this g-pawn, can't take on h3, and it threatens queen takes h2 checkmate. So this is what makes this game such a beautiful game. And I've always said in chess, I love the artistic side of chess, and I love beauty in chess, and this is something that's beautiful. This is a beautiful game. Okay, well, now we come over to a Morphy game, and this is a game played against a chap called Napoleon. I'm not sure it was the Napoleon, but it was Napoleon. And this is maybe a puzzle you haven't seen, but maybe you can have a go at solving. Remember the theme of this YouTube video, empty square sacrifices. Now, White played queen to e4. Now, in this position, Black is doing very well, but he is an exchange down. But after the next move, really, there was only one option available for White, and that was resignation. So what move here is a very brilliant move from Black that at least wins the White queen. So pause the video now. Any idea? Any joy? And a move that it was played, and a very nice move by the brilliantly talented and one of the most amazingly gifted chess players in the world, Morphy, was the move knight to g3. Again, moving this piece on an empty square, but why does this crazy looking move work? Because it looks like knight can be taken in multiple ways. Well, yes, the knight can be taken in a number of ways, but you are releasing this threat against the White queen. So this is the main idea. And if White captures the knight in any of the particular ways, Black will just win the White queen with a very easily winning game. And this knight on g3 takes away the very important hiding square for the White king, h1. So whatever happens next, let's say queen takes g6. Can you see the best move now for black? Checkmate in one move. Following a very similar theme to this last game we saw. Knight on d to e2, checkmate. And there we go, very beautiful checkmate there. So again, a very famous example. Okay, so let's now move over to some of the more modern day legends of chess. And we're now going to look at a game that was played between Garry Kasparov, quite possibly one of the greatest ever chess players to exist, and Nigel Short, who challenged Kasparov once in the World Championships final. And we have what has occurred from a French defence here. And the game continued, rook to e8. And this is now Garry plays a very typical idea, bringing all of his pieces around towards the black king. Garry Kasparov with white pieces. Knight to g3, and this knight can sometimes hop into h5, starting an attack. The black king does not have many defenders around it, so white is trying to bring his forces into attack where black is weak. The king side. Knight to f8, so Nigel trying to defend. The knight does hop into h5. And this kind of tempts black to play a move like g6, but in general, a rule well worth remembering is do not play pawn moves in front of your king unless you have to, because it will weaken your king. Okay, there's certain times when this is not the case, not always true when you're trying to make an escape square for your king, but especially early middle game, try not to make pawn moves in front of your king, because now look, this pawn move g6 has weakened a lot of the dark squares, so this is not ideal. So instead of that, knight b d7 was played. And now Garry again increases the pressure, g3. And the idea he wants to do is play h4 with his pawn. And then the h4 pawn will be guarded. And this controls the g5 square, which can then be a platform for a white piece. Knight g6, h4. So here we go. And Short brings his other knight to try and defend. So it's a very, very passive plan. And now again, a very nice idea from Nigel. Well, not from Nigel, sorry, from Garry. Garry now thought, how can I bring another piece into the attack? He's not in a rush. You don't need to rush. And he's thinking about the rook on e1. And he thought, well, if I go king to g2, this rook may well be better on h1 at some point if I can open up the h-file somehow. And this is a useful, just improving the position move. Black now played queen to d7, and here we saw another brilliant example of the empty square sacrifice. Now it looks like black's kingside is very, very well guarded with all these pawns and pieces around it. But after the next move, which is simply brilliant, white breaks into the kingside. And remember, when you have a good attack, you have to have a good foundation. White does have a good foundation here. Can you see the next move to try to open up the black king? There's not any way you can crash through. Like something, this knight takes g7 is not an empty square sacrifice. It's a more of a brutal attacking idea. But this is not so strong. After king g7, black may well be able to defend here. You can look at this yourselves at home. So pause the video now and have another look. What did white play? White now played the quite fantastic idea, bishop on c1 to h6. Stunning idea. This empty square sacrifice idea again. And the point is that black has to take, otherwise you're going to capture on g7. And when black does take, you now have created these weaknesses around the black king side. And after queen to d2, this queen is coming into h6 with your knight on h5. Very strong attacking piece. You have a very good winning attacking position here. And the game continued, pawn to f5, trying to defend along the 7th rank eventually, but now Garry simply took on f6 en passant, bishop d8, and now queen takes h6, and you can see he has a lot of pieces attacking. Rook to a7, this is Nigel's defensive idea, but now the other knight comes in, knight to g5, with a simple threat, f7 check, king to h8, queen to g7, checkmate. And the game finished very quickly here. So I thought that was a very nice example. And now let's move on to Magnus Carlsen, who used a very similar idea recently, only this year, in a game against MVL, who plays on Chess.com quite regularly. And in this game, we're now going to see another version of the empty square sacrifice. We had this position. Magnus Carlsen was white, and white is clearly better here. When you're trying to assess a position, look at the pieces, look at the pawn structure. White's pawn structure, I would say, is better because he has more space in the centre. That gives him a slight edge. And I would also say Magnus's pieces are better. The knight on f5 is a fantastic piece. Garry Kasparov once said that if you can get a knight on f5 and secure it to that square, it's worth 1 pawn. So even for a pawn, if you can get a knight secured to this square, it's a very good investment, and that's clearly what White's doing here. And after this position, okay, well, Magnus now played bishop to g5. Black took on d5 with a knight, looking like he's won a pawn for a crafty move here, but White had a very strong idea in mind. So again, this should be quite easy. What move did White have here to try to open up the Black King in the spirit of Garry Kasparov? And this doesn't even lose a piece, so it's not really a sacrifice as such. Pause the video if you need a bit more help. Remember these themes, the squares we've been looking at. We've been looking at g6, h6, h6 it is. Bishop to h6. And the point being now, well, Black took in the game, but now after check, bishop g5, and when Magnus recaptured, White has opened up the Black King side like a can of tuna on a rainy day or a sunny day, any day, a hungry day maybe. And this knight in f5 is beautifully placed. So that's just a little tactic that was used in the middle game to improve the position for White. You have created an open g file, very dangerous. Okay, and now the last example we're going to look at, I think a very nice example here, and this is a real one to test you guys out. Now we have this position here, and this was a famous game from Nimzovich, the good old Nimzovich against Hofer. And in this position, it looks like White is completely lost. White is lots of material down. I don't know how Black's pawns got that far up the board. They'd gone on a crazy mission. They're about to queen. Now, I'm going to ask you to pause the video at 2 times here. So the first pause is here. It's White to play. What is White's best chance of winning this position? Using an idea of an empty square sacrifice. Remember, your queen is on pre. So try to think of the best idea for White now. Well, the best idea is queen to h6. A phenomenally beautiful idea. The point being, if Black takes either the queen or the bishop, hopefully you can see the point, White wants to play knight to g4. So let's say pawn takes h6, which is actually what Hofer did in the game. White now played knight to g4. And even though White is, I don't know, I can't even count that high, that many pieces and points down, there is no way for Black to stop knight takes h6, checkmate on the next move. Beautiful. So after queen to h6, your next question here, I'm going to ask you to pause the video in a minute. Black can defend. How can Black defend this position and gain a better position? Pause the video now. Well, Black can actually defend by going g takes f6, and after knight to g4, pause the video again now if you want to see the only defensive move here. Basically, you need to find a way to stop knight takes f6. Well, he can do this by giving back his queen and playing queen takes f2. Now, knight takes f6, Black sacrifices on f6, and remember, he's got so much material, Black, he's going to be absolutely fine because White's only got a queen left. And if knight takes queen, Black just goes knight takes f2, and Black is winning here again. White does not have enough material. So, okay, I've tried to keep it very short and sweet there and just give you some ideas of the empty square sacrifice. Now, I remember a lot of people have told me, you know, talking about Buddhist things, do not speak, you know, unless you've got something nice to say. Another thing is do not speak unless it improves on silence. Hopefully that was better than silence. I don't know. A lot of people disagree with me, I'm sure, and prefer I just shut the hell up. But anyway, that's what you get with me. It was a funny story, actually. My friend told me, I don't know if this is true, but him and his mate were always joking about, and they went to a wedding once. Well, they were joking about each other. They're massive jokers. And he was the best man at his friend's wedding. And he was doing the speech, the best man speech. And I think and then he went up to do the speech, and he basically said, well, I was told once by my mother, if you don't have anything nice to say about someone, don't say anything at all. And he just stood there in silence for 30 seconds, looking around the room. And then everyone laughed eventually. But a very, very risky moment, should we say. Anyway, the empty square sacrifice are little tips to try to help you in your own games. Look for moves when you've got good positioning around your opponent's king, moves that open up your opponent's king side. So, you want to lever them open, and h6 is a typical square to do this on, g6, and the same way around for the other colours. And remember, attacks are only going to work when you have this good foundation and when your opponent's king is not particularly well defended. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Got my own YouTube channel as well you might be interested in, but of course I'm very grateful for any likes and for this video, any subscribes for this video, anything at all. Even if you hate the video, just tell me. I wouldn't be the first time. But okay, again, thank you very much for viewing it, and goodbye for now. Cheers.